Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Atypical Security Guard. Today, we're going to be talking about the K-Bar wrench knife. Novelty or needed? Guys, I'm going to give you my top 5 positives on this interesting little knife and whether or not this is something that you guys should look into or leave behind. Let's get right to it. Number 5 is the size. I like the size of this. Now, I typically prefer much larger knives because I have bigger hands. But sometimes based on the outfit that you're wearing, where you're going, a smaller knife is a better option. Okay, so I do like the size of this knife. Number 4 would be the simplicity. I mean, listen, this is a fixed blade. I'm a big fan of fixed blades, partly because I don't want a lot of moving parts. I don't want a situation where, something doesn't open if I need to deploy it. I don't want something that's going to break or malfunction. I love the design of a nice fixed blade. And for me, I'm thinking about always carrying a knife in a defensive daily carry, DDC, as opposed to the everyday carry. I don't carry them simply for the aesthetics. I'm carrying a knife for a secondary weapon system should I have an issue where I need to go to that or utilize that. Number 3 is going to be the design. I mean, guys, look, it's part wrench, it's part knife. I mean, that's pretty hard to debate. The look of the knife itself, it's pretty interesting. I like that it's all forged from one piece. It's got this really rustic look, this mechanical look. I mean, it's a wrench that is formed into a knife. It's hard to get too deep into the weeds about that. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I do appreciate that. The look of the knife itself, aside from the handle, it's fairly basic. But again, for somebody like me who's only looking at it from a defensive standpoint, there's not a lot that I'm needing in terms of the looks of this knife. I like the aesthetics of the handle. The only thing that I would change, I would like this thing to be maybe a little bit more rustic or rusted out. Maybe if it was, sanded down or had a little bit more color to it, I would like it because, it's just a little bit bland. But the most important aspect of this knife and what it brings to the table is the purpose. I mean, guys, this is almost more shank or shiv than anything else. It kind of reminds me of like a prison situation where you're filing something down. But for the purposes that I carry a fixed blade knife, which is self-defense, secondary system, I'm okay with that. There are a couple of drawbacks. I'll give you my top drawbacks. Number 1 is that the handle, it is so thin. This is a very thin knife. And I guess you could, wrap some sort of grip tape around that to kind of, thicken it up. But for my hands, that handle, it's just so thin. And that's kind of a problem for me. Also, with there not being anything added to the handle, clearly, if you were to put anything on there, it would take away from the aesthetics. The handle's a little bit slippery. Again, you could put some goon tape on that. You could wrap something on it. But by doing that, you kind of change the design of the knife and the purpose of the knife looking like a wrench. The biggest issue that I have with this knife across the board, it gives me kind of like butter knife energy. There's just something about it. Every time that I hold it, every time that I take it out, it just reminds me of like a butter knife or a steak knife. And if you're like me, part of the daily carry, part of the EDC carry, part of owning knives in general is the coolness factor. We like being able to show off the knives, talk about the knives, even from a personal standpoint, just knowing that you have a really cool knife. And aside from the back of this knife and the design of the back of this knife, there's just a lot to be desired that's left on the table. So I'm a little 50-50 on this. I'm very much into the idea of what they're trying to accomplish with it. I do think that from the design standpoint of it being forged from one piece of material, that's a good thing. And really, there's one more aspect of it that I think is a huge positive. If you're living in an area like me, I live in Portland. Now, we have horrible gun laws and a horrible relationship in terms of how the public views personal carrying of firearms. They're a little bit more open to seeing knives, a little bit more open to seeing knives on people. I don't think that there's much of an issue with that. one of the great things and one of the reasons why I purchased this is because if you're going to a place that might be a little less accepting of you openly carrying a knife, having this in your pocket where this is sticking out, that is not out of the ordinary. You know, in the Pacific Northwest, people carrying a wrench or carrying something rustic or something like that, not out of the realm of normalcy here. So you're less likely to get any sort of looks having this sticking out of a pocket as opposed to something like this, right? And again, that all comes down to just scrutiny, people having issues, potentially, you know, questioning you about whether or not you're carrying other items that could lead to negative conversations and potentially negative interactions. So that is the reason why I purchased this, is simply because the handle itself gives me an option to have this in circumstances or situations where maybe the area is not as friendly that I would like it to be if I need to open carry and have that knife available to me. So I'm going to say that I'm 60-40. I'm 60-40 on this knife. If you want to buy it strictly for the novelty, that's a great thing. If you want to buy it like me for something that you can have in a situation where you're not really in a permissive environment where, weapon systems are kind of, understood, appreciated, and respected, this is definitely a good knife to have. The single forged design, awesome. The only problem, just look at that. It looks so much like a fucking butter knife. It's butter knife-esque, steak knife-esque. In that part, I don't really appreciate it. So maybe I will look at getting this thing powder coated or something and kind of change it up a little bit. But that's my review on it. I would love to hear your take. Is this something that you guys would purchase, or is it something that you're leaving on the shelf? Let me know. Like, share, and subscribe, and be great.